Well, hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. And I have an exciting lesson for you, I think. I had a really good opportunity to, find a parable in my files, and I turned it into a lesson. And it's called The Wall We Build. And I want you to listen to this parable uh, as I discuss it in first person, as if I'm there. And I want you to put yourself there as well to see if you see yourself in the same storyline that I did as I wrote this out. So it has a great insight. I think we need to really pay attention to it. If it doesn't apply to you directly, thinking about those around you, maybe your family member or a friend or someone you come in contact with in a casual way, and you detect that this might be an issue in their lives. And maybe this might give you some insight of how to answer to help them in that time. So let's start the story. I don't know when I first began to build a wall. I suppose it was when it occurred to me that I could keep people out of my life by building a simple wall. The wall would be a kind of boundary, a kind of protection from the elements and people around me that I just don't care for. At first, the little wall was only knee high. It was really quite attractive, really, made of native stone that I had found in my own life. The wall was so small that some people didn't even notice it and fell flat on their faces when they stumbled across it. Others saw it but would step over it and come kind of close to me. I found this kind of very uncomfortable, so I built the wall higher. This was really much better now. But soon I found that people would come and rest their arms on the wall and started talking to me. Some stayed too long. Some were not my kind of people. It kind of bothered me, and it took up my time. Even when I edged the top of the wall with sharp stones, they didn't even seem to notice. They just kept on hanging on and wanted to deal with me and to talk with me and to engage with me. So one day, one of them vaulted over the wall and stood right inside. This made me really angry about what happened and what he did to me. So I decided to build a wall higher in my life. As I continued to build, I became more and more self-sufficient. I painted designs on the stones. I made arcs and colored windows that distorted the light so that no one could really see in or out. The wall pleased me so that I longed to show it to someone or explain how I had achieved such a design. But I realized that no one had stopped by to talk or for a long time now. Some walked by not seeming to notice me or my wall. Others stood sadly by and watched me build. I thought they were jealous of my wall, and I resented them, all of them. Well, one day a woman stopped to listen as I explained how I was building my wall. She wanted to come inside and see what I was doing. I explained to her that the whole purpose of the wall was to keep people on the other side. But I could tell that she didn't understand or care. As she left, I went back to build the wall higher. I became so absorbed in my wall that I found little time for anything else. I searched my life for new and different stones. I found stones that I didn't even know I had. The design was very important to me. I would build and rebuild until it was just the way I wanted it. Some stones were so dear to me that I polished them carefully several times a day. They just gleamed. Then one day I realized the wall was so high that I no longer saw anybody go by. I no longer could hear anyone. Everything was quiet. "Is anyone there?" I yelled. There was no answer. It was dark inside the wall, and the air was foul. I sat there for a long time. It was quiet and dark and lonely. Only the whisper of my memories could be heard. I thought of those who did not like my wall, who had laughed at it, scorned it, been jealous of it. I sat in the shadows and listened for someone to come and tell me that they really liked it. But it was dark and quiet, very quiet. I didn't know how long I sat in the shadow of my memories, frantically, but one day I noticed that one of the stones didn't match as well as I'd thought, and the wall was kind of crooked and kind of gotten a little ugly. Well, this is too much. I thought my wall was perfect, but it wasn't. So I examined the wall, and sure enough, there were other imperfections in it. And to add to the pain of my discovery, one day someone yelled from the other side, "Your wall is ugly. It is twisted and gray and misshapen." It was the day the flower fell at my feet that I began to cry. I ran to the wall and climbed to see who had thrown it over. By the time I had reached the top, no one was there. I returned to the flower and sat for a long time looking at its perfection and beauty. I began to see the folly of my wall and its imperfection. Floods of tears brought me to my knees. I am so alone. My wall is too high. My wall is imperfect and ugly. Everything is in vain. I have nothing left. Won't someone help me, please? I'll come back to that story in just a moment. Our first lesson today is from the mouth of and the heart of King David. And I want you to listen to his plea for help. Have mercy on me, O God, because of your loyal love. Because of your great compassion, wipe away my rebellious acts. Wash away my wrongdoing. Cleanse me of my sin, for I am aware of my rebellious acts. I am forever conscious of my sin. Against you, you above all, I have sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight. So you are just when you confront me. You are right when you confront me. Look, I am guilty of sin from birth, a sinner the moment my mother conceived me. Look, you desire integrity in the inner man. You want me to possess wisdom. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be pure. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Grant me the ultimate joy of being forgiven. May the bones you crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Wipe away all my guilt. Create from me a pure heart, O God. Renew a resolute spirit within me. Do not reject me. Do not take your Holy Spirit away from me, the desire to obey. Then I will teach rebels your merciful ways, and sinners will turn to you. Rescue me from the guilt of murder, O God, the God who delivers me. Then my tongue will shout for joy because of your righteousness. O Lord, give me the words. Then my mouth will praise you. Certainly, you do not want a sacrifice, or else I would offer it. You do not desire a burnt sacrifice. The sacrifice God desires is a humble spirit. O God, a humble and repentant heart you will not reject. Because you favor Zion, do what is good for her. Fortify the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will accept proper sacrifices, burnt offerings, and whole offerings. Then bulls will be sacrificed on your altar. Is that our cry too? Do we need help for our walled-in spirits? Do we feel isolated and forgotten and guilty or unloved in our life? Do we yearn for compassion and forgiveness in our life that we just can't seem to grasp? Do we, like David, reach out to our Father and seek his intervention into our lives? So let's continue our story to see the answer to this dilemma. Then a strange thing happened. Something inside me stirred as a baby quickens in its mother's womb. And the stillness of my broken world, I know in my whole being a blessed presence. I knelt there in wonder that God would come to me, and I wept with joy that I was not alone, and that my darkness had been penetrated by his blessed light. For days I stood in the joy of his presence. My whole walls shone with the warmth of his light, and I no longer felt cold and alone. I knew that he had watched me build that wall and that he had waited patiently for me to see I was in vain with my efforts. Finally, it occurred to me that he would know why my wall was so ugly. When I asked him, he began to teach me. Day by day, he showed me my error. He gave the stones names. The stone is jealousy. You must remove it. Sometimes I'd be reluctant. For days I'd protest. This was my favorite stone. It is the one I saved and cherished for years in my life, in my heart. When I was finally ready, though, he helped me to remove the stone. One day, when he had removed one of the heavier stones, a hand came through the opening. Take it, he said. So hesitantly, I took the hand. For a long time, I stood in the warmth of that grasp. Somehow I knew the hand and the one behind it had been waiting for an opening in my wall. There stirred in me a hunger and a longing for human comfort. At first I thought his presence within my wall was enough. But with the coming of the hand clasp, I knew he had come to tear the wall down. A part of me wanted to spring forth, but another part of me cried out in fear. Why couldn't I have kept a part of the wall in my life? His presence was enough. I looked at all the stones I had collected throughout my life. Some were still in the wall. The others he had stacked nearby in a corner. If I ever chose to rebuild the wall, I could. I begged him to throw them away, but he told me that in them I could test my strength. Oh, how they tempted me. One day, when he didn't seem to be around, I dashed over and picked up a cherished stone to rebuild my wall. It was then I realized that if I were to be strong enough to live without the wall, I would have to know that the stones were there. I would have to know the name of each one. And knowing their names, I could not use them again without betraying him. So as we removed more stones, the light came in. And his light would shine out in that opening. I began to look through the open places. I could see a thing that I had noticed a long time, dewdrops and ladybugs and sunbeams and individual snowflakes. Beauty. He told me many things and gave me gifts. And the more I talked to him, the more I wanted to talk to him, even more so. I saw things I had never seen before and heard things I had never heard before, dwelling with him. One day, as I was standing by an open place, a man stopped by to talk. I told him about the blessed presence and how he had changed my life. The man said he understood, but he said, if it's true, why do you have this block of resentment in your wall? I can't see him. The stone blocks his way. I looked, and sure enough, one of my most prized rocks lay directly in front of me, covering nearly one side of the wall. It had been one of the first stones I had placed there. It was a large conglomerate of disillusionment and childishness, stubbornness, and other petty stones. I asked the man if he would help me remove it. I was so ashamed the blessed presence might see this large stone. The man did loosen the stone, and I thanked him as he went on his way. I wondered how I could ever remove that stone without help. I really tried, I did. I tugged, and I tried so hard and struggled, but I only could move it slightly. I sat down in despair. I knew the man was right. The stone must be removed from my life, from my wall. Oh dear, I said, how can I ever remove this one? It's so large and I am so weak. You can't remove it, he said. But I must, I said. I just couldn't believe it. The man said he could hardly believe that you were there and the stone was there. If you really want to remove it, I'll help you remove it. We went carefully over to the wall and chipped away each small stone until the large one was diminished. Even with the stone of resentment gone, people kept stumbling over debris and remnants of the wall as they walked through my life. There was a woman who knew him and had let him tear down her wall. She walked in and sat down on one of my stones. I told her what he had done for me, and she told me what he had done for her as well. I told her how I had suffered so that I could never forget how forsaken and lonely I had felt inside of my wall. Oh, yes, she said, self-pity is a terrible thing. When she left, I found the stone of self-pity in my wall. I was wet with tears. I dried it off and laid it over with the other stones. The wall was almost demolished. I looked around at all the world I could see. I thought of his great love for me, and I breathed a deep sigh of satisfaction and pride that I have come this far. Look how much I accomplished, I thought. How much better I know him than some of these others out there. Poor, enlightened ones who didn't know him nearly as well as I. It is so easy. Why can't they see? Overwhelmed by all he had done for me and all he had taught me, I stood upon one of the remaining stones and began to tell anyone who passed by what a blessed presence had done for me. I was appalled that no one seemed to hear or even understand what I was saying. I told them how dark and lonely it had been inside the wall and how he had come to help me tear it down, how vain it was to even try to build a wall. I noticed others working on walls and ran over to plead with them to stop, but no one would listen. In frustration, I cried out, "Why can't they hear? Why can't they understand? Why can't they believe me?" I lay face down on the stone that I had stood upon. It was extremely large, highly polished. It had been my greatest prize. It was more than life size. "Do you want the answer to your questions?" he asked. "Oh, you know I do," I sighed. "Well, raise your head and look at the stone you're lying upon." I raised my head and gasped, for I saw my own reflection in the massive stone. There was pride in my look and my manner. I knew the stone was pride. Quietly, we removed it. Now we could see beyond the meadow, and a path led forth from where I stood. Then he said a strange thing to me. "Now you must go. I will go with you, and yet I will stay here." "But I don't want to leave," I confessed, and I protested this. "The wall still stands. There are other stones to remove. I want to be here with you." "I said I would go with you," he said. "There is an opening in the wall for you to come and go. Do you remember the flower that fell at your feet, the hand that you clasped, the woman who showed you self-pity, or the man who showed you resentment?" "Oh, yes," I sighed. "Oh, yes." "Then you must go and do likewise. For to whom much is given, much is expected. Wherever you go, I go with you. And whenever you come back here to be tempted or to remove one of the stones, I'll be here as well." And Isaiah 6:8 tells us of Isaiah's commission from the Lord to us. Listen carefully. "And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And then I said, Here I am. Send me." Soon I went forth, and I saw a wall builder. He had just started to build his wall, and I saw pain and hurt in his face and confusion in his frenzy to build. I leaned against the wall, wanting to tell him I understood, but the stones were placed so that the sharp edges cut me and so I retreated in pain. I stood by the wall, nursing my wounds. In sadness, I watched him build. Soon his wall was so high I could not even see him, and my heart ached because I knew it was dark and lonely inside. I called to him, but he could not hear. The ugliness of the wall was unbelievable. I reached out and I touched it and I leaned against it. I don't know how long I was there, but one day I heard someone yell, "Your wall is ugly, is twisted and gray and misshapen." Strangely, though, I had never heard a sound from the wall before. Wow. Great racking sobs exploded from inside. Tears streamed down my face, and I cried out in frustration, "Won't you help me, please, please?" I thought my heart would break. In desperation, I looked about. If only I could give him a gift to ease his pain. I looked down to find a small flower at my feet. Hastily, I plucked it and threw it over the wall. Then the sobbing stopped, and I know a great peace, for in some strange way I knew that the blessed presence had come to him, and that my aching heart and the gift of flower had helped bring it about. I knew that soon there would be an opening in the wall, and I could grasp the hand. I knew, too, that he might never know that it was there, and even who I was. But it really didn't matter. For some wonderful way, I had become a part of every person's life. Through the blessed presence, we would all become one. Somehow I knew I would never be the same. I returned to my wall, and the blessed presence was there. Together we removed the stones of fear, then mistrust and indifference. He said, "Now you begin to understand love. Without love, all the things I have told you would be meaningless. You will begin to live in peace and understanding. You will learn gentleness and kindness, but it will take time. I will always be in you." So it was that I went forth reaching out. Sometimes just waiting beside a wall, sometimes tossing a flower, sometimes grasping a hand. There are days that I return to my wall. I tough the stacked stones and examine the remnants of my wall. At times I'm filled with the desire to rebuild it, but we talk, and he helps me to be strong. Sometimes we remove another stone. You know, it's strange that I begin to recognize others like me. When I see someone with a flower, I know that it has been thrown over a wall. Sometimes I see someone standing by a wall, sadly watching a wall builder. I see those who are sitting on stones, explaining what kind of stones they have used. I know the blessed presence is with them too. We pass on the path, and a great love passes between us. I see peace in their eyes and faith in their hearts, and I know that someday the walls will be down, and we will all walk free from place to place, the great family of God. The end. Do you hear yourself in that story? Do you hear others in that story? So God responds to his son, where Paul described the answer to David's prayer that we read earlier from a letter to the church at Corinth. Let me read it to you. "Now, in giving the following instruction, I do not praise you because you have come together not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear there are divisions among you, and in part I believe it. For there must, in fact, be divisions among you, so that those who are approved may be evident. Now, when you come together at the same place, you're not really eating the Lord's Supper. For when it is time to eat, everyone proceeds with his own supper. One is hungry, and another one becomes drunk. Do you not have houses so that you can eat and drink? Or are you trying to show contempt for the church of God by shaming those who have nothing? What should I say to you? Should I praise you? I will not praise you for this. For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night in which he was betrayed, he took the bread. And after he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he also took the cup, and after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this every time you drink it in remembrance of me. For every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." So in one great instance of our Christian faith, when we bow our heads and partake of the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper, we are there to take away the stones that separate us from God and from our brothers and our sisters. It is there when we confess our wall to him and partake of his body and blood of sacrifice to bring us back into his presence, the blessed presence. We cannot fully partake of God's answer through his Son unless we remove the stones, and that will take us the rest of our lives. Well, I want to close with a few questions to challenge you today as you think about this story. 1, do you have some stones in your life that help form a wall separating you from your neighbor? How about your family? And most importantly, how about your God? Number 2, name some stones in your life that you need help in removing so that you can be free. Just think about them. 3rd, who has thrown a flower of hope over your wall? And lastly, do you know of someone who has built or beginning to build their wall? What should you do? What has been instructed you to do? Well, may God bless you. I hope you enjoyed this story. I enjoyed doing it for you. Bye-bye.